Holy cow, folks, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another edition of the Rec Poker Podcast. So first, I got to say Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to 2023. Can you believe how 2022 ended? Oh my God. When you think about all the amazing things that happened in that last week of 2022 over the holidays, I can't even get into the details. I'm just like blown away. What an amazing way to end the year. And also my condolences for all the people that were affected. So thanks all in case you haven't guessed, we were pre-record some of these. So I'm speaking from the past, but I'm very glad that I'm welcoming you into the new year here at Rec Poker. We've got a ton of exciting things coming up. There's going to be WSOP is going to be around the corner in no time. We've got Marek Madness going to be here in March. We're already putting together some of the themes of the month coming up down the road. We've got a new Wrecking Crew member to welcome. It's just an exciting time to be around. I hope everyone's done a great job sticking with their New Year's resolutions. If you're hearing this on the day that it came out, it's only Tuesday, January 3rd. So I like your odds so far. But stick with it. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. And thank you for joining us here on the Rec Poker Podcast, starting your year off on the right foot. So here we are. I'm joined by the Wrecking Crew, just like I have to start every episode. I'm just so grateful that we've got this fantastic community of free community members, that all it takes for you to join us here is an email address and a smile, although both are compulsory. Head on over to rec.poker and get a free account today. Join us in the forums, Discord, in the home games, come on the podcast. It's just a million ways to study poker, to learn poker, to celebrate your poker wins, to commiserate your poker losses, and do it with other folks like us who just love the game and love spreading our love of the game. So to do it, I have to thank our amazing sponsor, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. I have to thank our premium members who are chipping in that $15 a month to keep us going here. I have to thank the Wrecking Crew, because it takes a whole crew to do what we do here at Rec Poker. You might recognize my voice because they give me the mic on Mondays, but I'm just one member of the Wrecking Crew. My name's Jim Reed. I'm Bluffsterini in the home game at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter, if Twitter even exists in this dystopian hellscape that we're finding ourselves in 2023. If you want to find out more about me and the rest of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, but you can also just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them right here tonight.
My name is Ben Enslow. I'm BJM96 on Twitch. You can find all my other socials there, and I'm East Coast Bidder in the home game.
Well, I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter, and if Twitter goes away, I just got invited to my first Post account. Has anyone heard about Post? That might be the next things, maybe replacing Twitter. You can find me 5x5. I got 5x5, the official, like no messing around. It's 5x5 on Post. And I am 5x5 in the Poker Stars home game.
Nice.
And I am John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere. And I will be willing to take a bet that Mastodon is more likely to take over than Post.
I'm 5x5 there too.
Good, covering all your bases.
Well, I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 just about everywhere, including Twitter and Mastodon. So there you go.
Oh, now I'm feeling like I better jump on this Post Mastodon business, because the future of Twitter, who knows? Who knows? By the time people are listening to this, it might not even exist. So thanks, Wrecking Crew members. It takes a village, like I say. I'm so proud to be on the Wrecking Crew with such wonderful folks like Rob, Ben, Chris, and John here, as well as some real killers like Gareth James, Dario Kearney, Kevin Mathers, Kim Kilroy, Eric Ginn, Keith Monkey System Brandt, Troy Chapman. We got all sorts of amazing members that have come at taken that next step to help us spread our love of poker, whether it's through coaching, building the game. There's just a million ways to get involved and to take your game to the next level, and to take your love of poker to the next level here at Rec Poker. So I'm so glad to do that. If you were listening last week, you heard a post from John Crowell, who's a premium member here at Rec Poker. He's back this week to talk. We're going to be looking at a hand that Ben Enslow, East Coast Bidder himself, posted in the Rec Poker forums. And so let me see. I think I've thanked the sponsors. I've mentioned the premium membership. I've told people to come and join for free. Let's get into the hand. So Ben Enslow, we're going to be looking at a hand posted by the one and only Jammin96 in the Rec Poker forums here about facing a river overbet on ACR. Overbets are one of those things that we are less comfortable with. They're kind of outside the normal mainstream of poker sizing. And it can put us in some kind of difficult positions or some positions where we don't have as much experience as with some of those more typical sizes between like 1/3 and 2/3 pot. So take us through this this forum post that you posted facing a river bet on ACR.
Yeah, well, thanks for the intro, Jim. Appreciate the welcome and everything. And yeah, this is a post I just put up here. I think it was yesterday. But played this on the this tournament on the weekend. It was on ACR. I actually haven't really played much volume on ACR. There's tons of good tournaments going on over there, and here in Clayton, and some other people talk about ACR and stuff. I decided I'd jump in. I think I only loaded on like $25 or something like that just to play in some smaller stuff. But this was one of the bigger ones that I played, and this was a 660 buy-in PKO. I can't remember. I think it was like a 3 or a 4K guarantee. I'm not sure. Somewhere's in there. It might have been a 5K guarantee, because usually they have like pretty decent guarantees on their tournaments. So we ran well. We have 347K in chips, and that's
Nice.
off of a 125K starting stack.
All right.
We scooped a bounty. I think we got lucky and scooped a bounty
Yeah.
at some point. So we do have a bounty, and it's a PKO. So I think half the bounty prize gets added to our head, I believe, or our
Yeah.
prize.
So our bounty
Possibly.
increases for the person that takes us out, and then we get to put half of that bounty in our bankroll and just take it right off the table.
Yeah, right. So these are the style of tournaments that I usually play. I play quite a few PKOs, are kind of my go-to. I like the fact to be able to, win my buy-in back potentially before I even get to the money is a really nice kind of feature of these tournaments.
Yeah, and these are kind of like the anti-satellite format. Satellites are all about ICM, conserving your stack, not making, big moves and playing small ball. With bounty tournaments, you're kind of incentivized to get your chips in a little more often. So aggressive players like you and me, Ben, I think this is kind of our bread and butter. So it doesn't surprise me one bit that you've been playing a bunch of these and succeeding.
Well, yeah, especially with Chris, teach me about, big bet sizes and stuff like that, and getting me out of my comfort zone there, right? So
There you go.
Well,
so we're
actually,
at the
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I
No,
was
it's
just
all
going to
right.
ask both of you, since I think you both play more PKOs than I do. I'm not that, I play them sometimes just for fun, but I'm not super well studied on them. And I know we're going to be, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, Jim, talking about how overbets are kind of they're thing we don't encounter all that much. Do you think you encounter them more in PKOs?
I think you should. If people in PKOs, a big emphasis is placed on who's covering who. And so it's a spot where you're applying pressure is different than a typical ICM tournament, because if you're the short stack, other people are incentivized to call your shoves in a way that they're not in a typical tournament. And when you're the big stack, you don't even have to worry about that, but you can actually benefit from people with smaller stacks getting involved with you. And so it creates wider ranges that want to get action. And because taking the very bottom chip from someone's stack is more important here, the worst thing you can do is get into a spot where you take like 90% of someone's chips, but you don't get their bounty. Right. So you tend to size up a little bit so that you're always being able to put that bottom chip in play. And I do think that creates not only more action, more aggressive lines, but also bigger bets and more overbets.
Right. So we should the one thing to keep in mind as we're listening to this is this is a situation that probably, if we play this type of tournament, will come up more often.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, so we're at the I guess we'll just talk about the hand. I kind of lost my train of thought when I was listening to Chris.
That'll happen.
That's all right.
Happens to all of us all
I
the
always
time.
have these thoughts, and then ooh, there they go, off
Yeah,
with the wind.
well, now Ben, you're also used to streaming, which is a
Mhm.
very different experience than this sort of podcast by committee thing, right? So, and if you want to check him out, I mean, of course, I encourage everyone head over to twitch.tv/BEJAMIN96 and catch all of Ben's action over there, because then it's just unfiltered stream
Yeah.
of consciousness, Ben letting us know what's in his head at every decision point. It's a lot of fun there too. But yeah, here you get Chris Jones and Rob Washam and John Somsky chipping in, and all you got to do is just soak up the knowledge. Just sit back and soak all that wisdom up. It can be disarming from time to time. I completely agree.
So yeah, so 2K, 4K, we got 86.9 bigs. We get an open from the hijack, a min raise, and our villain stack covers us. He has 111 big blinds, so he has quite a few chips, which is 446K. We have only played 19 hands, 16% VPIP, no raises or 3-bets. And it folds to us, and we have ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs. So what do you guys think right off the bat? Should we be calling? Should we be 3-betting?
And we're in the big blind.
And we are in the big blind, yeah. So we already have
I think-
one chip in.
I think GTO says this is a call.
Now they're
Unless you have a
min-raising.
unless you have a specific read on the player that he's going to be folding a lot to a 3-bet, I think this is strictly a call. Two things. It's not a suited hand. It's kind of a vulnerable hand. It's kind of in that middle section. It's not it's not the wheel draw. It's not the Broadway draw. It's kind of right there in the middle, not suited. And you're the big blind, so you're closing the action. So you don't have to reopen it. You can just see what progresses.
Yeah,
Chris,
and I
did you
mean,
have something there?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of these. If I just looked it up too, it's one of those things where it's not pure as the solver folks say. We do mix this a little as a raise, but it is mostly a call. And I like it as a call. We're so deep. We can get ourselves into a lot of trouble here. I like to take this hand and see where we land.
yeah, and
And
that's kind of where I ended up with it too, just because we're so deep when we have so many chips, and it's like, why risk more if he's gonna call? And he is fairly tight. I mean, it's only 19 hands, so we can't really put too much into it. So,
but one thing I do want to draw attention to is that in 19 hands, he's playing a VPIP of 16, but a PFR of 0. So the fact that like this is the only time they've ever opened so far in 2 orbits, and part of that can come down to just sample size, but I think we should give them credit for having a non-garbage hand here if this is the first aggressive action we've ever seen them take in 2 orbits. So it's not a big enough sample size to put a lot into it, but that would also incline me just to close the action here and see what comes next.
yeah, so that's what I end up doing. I just had one other thought. I just wanted to do you guys like a 3-bet if we're suited here? Like if we have ace-9 of spades or ace-9 of clubs, do we like a 3-bet then, or are we still just calling?
I'll just jump in because I see no one else is unmuted. It kind of cuts both ways because it's suited. It's a stronger hand, so you can kind of make a value raise in a way. But because it's suited, it's very flop dependent, and so that also in a way makes it a good candidate to just check to just call behind and see a flop as well. So my typical answer is it depends.
Okay.
No, I think it's a call either way. And actually, it's in my mind, I would rather 3-bet with ace-9, knowing that I could easily fold that to a 4-bet. Whereas ace-9 suited, I'd like to see a flop with that, because there's so much you can gain so much equity with if you happen to flop your suit. So I don't want to 3-bet that and get blown off of that hand. I'd rather just see a flop with it. So
Yeah, I kind of say that in here because I think a suited hand makes a much better call, considering that we're going to have to play out of position post flop, and the suitedness is going to make it a little easier to play.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah, this
Chris?
deep, I think I like when we think about like the kinds of hands that we want to do a 3-bet here when we're this deep. I think the aces drop down because they have so much sort of in value just to see a flop. And this is the kind of hand where my 3-bet bluffs are going to come from suited hands like Jack 10, 10, 9, some of those kinds of suited hands. I think would make really more attractive 3-bet bluffs to me than some of the suited aces do. You mix a few of those in there, but if I'm going to 3-bet my suited aces, they're going to be strong ones. Like they're going to be the ace, queen, ace, king. For shallower, that changes, but it's a different story for me. But when we're this deep, I want to let those hands see a flop.
And also the last thing that occurs to me in this spot is when you think of all the ace X hands that we could have, ace 9 is not good enough to be 3-betting for value, but it's also not bad enough that you're going to be folding out a lot of better hands. So like I'd rather be 3-betting with like ace 4 or ace 5, even ace 6, where maybe they'll fold ace 7, they'll fold ace 8, they'll fold ace 9. If we 3-bet with ace 9, they're not folding ace jack, they're not folding ace queen. It's a disaster if they fold ace 6 or ace 7. So I think this just feels better, just play in the middle of our range, that condensed portion of our range. And then the downside is we have to make some difficult poker decisions now post flop, out of position with a hand that's likely going to end up making one pair. And that's just a tough spot to be in, but there's enough value to the hand here that folding it would be too nitty, I think.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. That's pretty much how I made my decision. So that all sounds dandy. So the flop is the 10 of diamonds, the ace of clubs, and the king of spades. And there's 5.7 big blinds in the pot. And we have about 86 bigs for the effective stack. So we check and villain bets 15K, which is 3.7 bigs. And we call. So what do you guys think? Should I say about the check raise in here? I'm not really sure if we're supposed to be I like a check call. I don't know what you guys think, but
yeah, I like a check call here, kind of for the same reason why we called pre-flop. Like this flop doesn't really change the distribution of hand strength between us and our opponent that much. If they had a better ace, they're still ahead. If they had a low suited connector or something, we're still ahead. They're going to be c-betting at a pretty high frequency on boards like this. And if we check raise here, we're really just allowing them to fold the worst hands and continue with the better hands. I'd rather be check raising with a worse hand or a stronger hand. So I think, again, for the same reason, I'm probably just check calling here.
Yeah, I don't forget this hand. I don't think we can check raise much at all in this board. I mean, do we feel good with ace 10 offsuit check raising here? Maybe, but that's still kind of like, I mean, this is an ugly board for us as the big blind caller. I just don't think, I mean, I don't think we can ever have ace king. We can't have aces. We can't have kings. I don't think we can ever have ace king. So I think our best hand is maybe ace 10. Maybe we can have pocket tens, maybe, but not in full. So I just don't think we can represent enough value. Queen jack is probably the best hand. I mean, obviously the straight, right? The nut straight. We can have that, but I don't think that's enough for us to just be check raising much. In fact, if I had queen jack probably here, I'd be calling, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think one other candidate we could check raise with here might be king 10, where we're unblocking the top pair hands that we want them to have in this spot, but we are blocking their 2-pair hands that we don't want them to have. And we're also just doing really well against their 1-pair hands, and even against their draws. They're in here with ace jack, ace queen or something. We're in pretty good shape against them as well. So that would be a check raise candidate. But I think you're right. Other than that, and I guess pocket tens. Yeah, I could see pocket tens being one that we might have here and check raising, but it's a pretty
even
narrow
still,
range.
Yeah, pocket tens is probably a 3-bet pre.
Yeah.
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 So the hands that you're going to wind up here with, you just don't have enough hands to check raise to offset the hands that you can't check raise. I mean, you know what I mean? You have to have a bucket of hands that you're willing to check raise with. We've come up with 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
bucket's pretty empty.
the bucket's pretty empty. So if he's pretty much going to know exactly what you have.
Yeah.
And he's going to be able to play perfectly against that range. So by calling, you leave everything in your range that was there to begin with.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so that's exactly what I did. I just call here. So the turn gets interesting. We turn the ace of hearts. So the board now is 10 of diamonds, ace of clubs, king of spades, ace of hearts. So I think that's full rainbow.
Yep.
And there's 50, almost 53K in the pot, so 13 bigs. And again, we're still the effective stack. We have 82 left behind.
Super
after
deep.
calling them. Yeah,
Yeah.
after calling the flop. So I say before we kind of talk about it, so we make trips. Do we ever find a lead here? That's kind of what I was wondering. Do we ever lead out? We're so deep, we faced a lot of aggression so far in the hand. He could still have us crushed, but we like our hand. So I'll just leave it at that and then kind of go from there.
I like a lead. I like a really, really small lead here. Ace, ace, king, 10, rainbow. There's no flush draws. If we think about this from villain's perspective, right? When we lead small here, what are they going to do with? What are they going to do with? I don't know. Queen 9. What are they going to do with? Even Jack 10. What are they going to do with? King Jack. They're probably calling, but how much of villain's range can actually raise us? So we're going to fold out a bunch of stuff that we probably would like to get rid of. I think like Queen 9 probably has to fold. Some of these hands that have a little, some equity against us have to fold. But you almost have to have a full house, maybe a straight. Could you? Are aces gonna? I mean, is Ace Jack gonna raise us? I don't know if they are. Maybe they are, but I don't know if I would. So I think the danger of us getting raised is pretty small, and I really like a small bet to clean up some equity.
So
and we set the price
basically,
too.
Yeah, basically you're not going to be able to fold out anything that beats you right now. But what hands are going to call you? So where are you getting value from the bet? Other than denying him equity with some of those hands you mentioned, like Queen 9 and King Jack.
Well, he's also forced to call with like all the. I mean, our 9 still plays, right? Ace. Yeah, our 9 still play.
Yeah.
If he has ace 3 suited, our 9 still
little
plays.
aces. Yeah.
So if he's and all those suited aces, I think, are here, right? They probably open down to ace deuce suited, probably, and they probably c-bet with that, and now they're here. So we're capturing value from that. We're folding out stuff that we don't want to draw to equity, and we are really putting them in jail because I think they can only raise us with a full house or better. Maybe Queen Jack. Maybe Queen Jack can raise us, but that's still a scary raise for Queen Jack.
One thing that's interesting to me is when you think about the hands that would check back if we check, but now are forced to call. The King X hands, the 10X hands, the pocket queens, they're probably not continuing. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I think they're more likely to call a small bet here, and a lot of those hands are going to check back. So we get to extract value from those hands in a way that we wouldn't by checking. And when we check and they bet, I think we're now facing a polarized range that's actually harder for us to play on the river.
When they call this bet, if they call, like, if let's say we put in two and a half, three big blinds here, and they call it, if this river card isn't a Broadway card, they are so capped at that point that I love our hand. But if we check here and they bet, we have no idea where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes the river harder to play because I think we can confidently value bet if we get called. Whereas if we check call, we kind of have to check a lot and then just guess.
Yeah, pray.
yeah.
Which is what I realized after I wrote it out. And I've said this before on the forums podcast where I write these hands out and then I'm writing it out and I'm like, that would have been a perfect time just to lead. Why didn't I just put in like a quarter or third pot bet and just like, then we have control of the pot. And then if he raises us, then we can make decisions then, right? So
yeah, I'll just jump in to reinforce that point because we talk about it here from time to time. But you know, your brain, you use your brain differently when you're describing a hand, when you're putting things in your own words, when you're going through the action yourself as an observer. You have to think about it differently. You have to put it into your own words. Your brain has to think about it differently. And often people tell me this all the time. By the time they get to the end of writing their forum post, they've already answered all their own questions just because they've taken a more thoughtful approach to the hand. So there's just so much benefit from posting hands like this, not only from the insights you'll get from other people, but from what your own brain can tell you if you just recontextualize it in this context.
And then the streaming adds an extra aspect because then I can go and look at my reaction right in the moment. I can see myself on camera, like, okay, this is what I was thinking in the moment. And I can hear myself talk through that and stuff like that. So then I get two different perspectives. I get in the moment, I can rewatch what I was thinking, and then I can go back and I can write out the hand itself and do a forms post, and then I get double the information basically. So I think it's been helping my game a fair amount. But yeah, so I check and he bets. How much does he bet here? Sorry, guys.
No, that's good. This is the turn.
Yeah, this is the turn. So he bets 34, basically 35K, which is 8.7 bigs. So I say here, yeah,
2/3 pot or so.
2/3. Yeah, it's a chunky bet. And I say here, now should we check raise? And again, this is where we're in jail now. Like, like Chris said, like, what do we do? Now it's like, okay, now do we check raise? Like, anyways, and then, yeah, that's basically, I'm curious to see what you guys think about that. I mean, yeah, the pot's getting big.
What do you think, Chris?
I think we just have to call this. I can't see. I think raising puts us in that sort of, as the poker guys say, that game theory disaster land. Like we're just letting our opponent play perfectly, and so I like a call.
Rob?
I don't think we can check raise. I mean, there's very few hands at this point that he's going to fold. So we're really check raising to what? To get him to fold something? What are we trying to get him to fold? And I can't think of a hand right now that plays this way. You know, small bet on the flop and then a 2/3 bet on the turn. On this kind of board, especially it turns another ace, right? So yeah, I just don't see any hands that we're going to get to fold to that check raise. And then, so then we're trying to get value, trying to get him to call a check raise with a hand that we beat. And he's not doing that either. So yeah, I don't think there's any reason to check raise this.
Yeah, and I think that was in game. That was pretty much what it came down to too. And we're still covered. Like we can still be beat here and we're still, you know, I just wish I would have led turn.
But let's just to for the purposes of illustration. So think about this. We've got trips on this board and we still don't feel comfortable about our hand. And this is why playing these hands out of the blinds in particular is so hard. I think when we go back a few years ago, I think one of the first rec poker themes of the month was playing ace X out of the blinds, because it's a situation where you're like, well, I've got too much equity to fold. I'm not going to be one of those nits that folds ace X out of the blinds, but there are no good flops for you other than like flopping top 2 pair. There are no good flops for a 1 pair hand. And so when you call with a hand like this from the blinds, you're basically saying, I hope I make a strong pair and that my opponent slows down so that I can get to showdown, because those are really the only times you're going to win these hands. And so if you're listening at home, don't be afraid. You can just fold. You can just fold some of these ace off hands from the big blind, and you know they're hands where you're liable to lose a big pot or win a small pot, and those kind of reverse implied odds hands aren't great to be choosing as an investment opportunity. But you don't, playing in a tournament like this, you don't get to just sit around and wait for premiums to come around. You do need to kind of wrest the value out of it. But I think this just goes to show is show me a better flop, show me a better turn than having trips in a spot like this, and you still don't know. You're still not confidently value betting or even confidently bluff catching. It just goes to show how hard these hands are to play out of position.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what I do. I just check call here. I talk myself out of the check raise. So yeah, so the river is the jack of spades. So now
Oof.
this board is really dicey. We got the 10 of diamonds, ace of clubs, king of spades, ace of hearts, jack of spades on the river, and we have ace 9 off. And there's 30 bigs in the pot now. 122K, almost a starting stack, actually. I didn't realize that. But and then the hero stack, we have 73 bigs, and the villain has 97. So we're still effective here. So, and so we check the river, and they go all in.
Does anyone like a leading here, like just like a blocker bet essentially, because we know that they're never raising us as a bluff? Like sometimes I feel like in spots like this we can make a lead, mostly because then we get to fold with confidence if they proceed. Like when we check here, it makes it easier for them to put us on a weaker hand and bluff us. I don't know. I guess that's very villain dependent. You'd have to give them a lot of credit to think that was worth it, because it's hard to get called by worse, right? Yeah,
right. I think a lead on the turn or the river is totally fine. A small lead, kind of like a blocking bet. You're going to find out I mean, it's a way of getting to showdown without exposing your entire stack. And like you say, he's not going to check raise, or he's not going to raise you with anything that you beat. So it'd be very easy to fold on the turn or the river if you lead out and get raised. And we gave him the opportunity to take that ace-6 offsuit and jam it into our face on the river, knowing that even if we have a queen, we can't hardly call that, because the queen is just nothing but a straight at this point in time, right?
Yeah, that paired board's got to be scary when you think about, they've got ace 10, they've got ace jack, they've got ace king, they've got pocket jacks probably plays this way.
They got ace queen that plays this way.
Yeah.
I just had a hard time. I was having a hard time. Yeah, I was just having a hard time. Like when I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, what do I beat here? Like I don't like.
Nothing.
I feel like I don't beat anything. Like
You don't.
that's like
the only thing you might beat is a smaller ace, which you're giving him the opportunity to do this, but chances are, and because he has you covered, he's going after your bounty, hoping you have a hand like pocket nines or something. I don't know.
But even would a smaller ace still be worried about being beat here in this spot though, with this kind of a run out?
That's the problem. I think a smaller ace. So if this player is capable of having bluffs, they're probably even worse than an ace, right? It's a hand like Maybe Jack 10 somehow finds this and turns itself into a bluff.
Jack 9 even.
Yeah, Jack 9 is a really interesting hand to maybe turn into a bluff.
What about like King Jack?
Yep.
Yeah, I like the hands that have a Jack or a 10 in them if I'm trying to turn this into a bluff, because I want to represent the full house of Jacks or 10s. So I think those are the bluffs we see. I don't think many players are capable of doing that, honestly. I think this is so purely a value shove that we should feel very comfortable folding. But I do like, for the same reason I like Jim's, or the lead that I mentioned on the turn. If we didn't do it on the turn, I don't mind a block bet here, just so that we can just feel even more confident that there's nothing like Jack 10 in here. But I don't know. I would fold this.
I would fold it too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
No choice. No choice.
If the Jack was a deuce,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
love to talk about what people would do if the Jack was a deuce.
Do we just call it off?
I mean, it's a different conversation because
It's still scary.
I mean, it's definitely still scary, but
Oh yeah.
they have a smaller set of hands that improve to like the super coconuts here in that kind of a spot. Having the four straight out there, plus those Broadway ace X hands that they're going to be taking this line with. It's true that they'd have ace 2 sometimes, but I just think this is a worse card objectively than that.
There's
I mean,
yeah.
I'm probably still folding. I don't
Probably.
you know,
I think I
but
am too.
Yeah, especially
it's
with
such
this
a big
of a
overbet.
bet. This is huge. This is like
Yeah.
over 2x pot.
Yeah. But then again, so like, how did we get ourselves in this position where we're folding almost all of our range now, right? Like, so what are the hands that we are continuing with? We're basically saying it's full houses. And if we don't
ace
have
Jack, ace 10.
Yeah. So
Because ace king, we've 3-bet pre, right?
right. So this is another like, so then some thoughtful opponents really should be betting here a lot, like they should be bluffing here a lot, because we're saying our reasoned analysis tells us that we're laying down trips. That's pretty high in our distribution of the hands that we could have here. So is this a spot, like I struggle with this from time to time, gang. Maybe you can help me out with this. Like, how much responsibility should we feel to like maintaining a minimum defense frequency in a spot like this, or like to letting distribution choose which hands we fold and which hands we call with? Because I just feel like we're behind here so often, but we're still pretty high in our range. How do we decide what to do with that? Like, what would we do with ace queen? Right? Like, let's say we make the straight here. We're still losing to a lot of the range.
Ace queen, I'm calling.
Yeah,
I have to
you're
call
calling
it.
ace queen.
The blocker of
Because
the
I
ace.
block
Yeah.
it. And I have the straight now.
Yep. Is that the worst hand?
I think so.
Wow.
Okay, so ace 9 isn't that much worse, right? Like, we are actually, if you think about it like that, ace 9 is I guess it's behind the queen X hands, but we're not blocking the full houses with the queen X hands. So it's interesting. It's a really interesting spot.
Yeah, I guess let's see. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, is just in terms of like, forget absolute value, but talking about blocker value and like what it means to us against our opponent. Is ace not having the ace more valuable than having the queen?
This is something that the two poker guys would get right to the bottom of. This is their kind of question, isn't it? Because
we talked about leading the turn and leading the river. We have ace nine. What other hands do we lead the turn or lead the river with besides ace nine? Is it like ace eight, ace seven, any ace with a less than a 10?
Yeah, maybe.
Is that basically the range of hands we're talking
That's
about?
what I
mean,
would lead the turn with those. I don't know about the river, but with the turn, I really like that. Once this jack comes, it's
Yeah, and that's why I left the lead out on my river discussion. I didn't even really put in a lead on the river there just because of the actual card itself. Just, I don't know if it, I don't know. It seems,
I mean, the only other thing, I mean, Jim, you were asking about what I would do in terms of how I let distribution. Part of that has to do with like how good do I think my opponent is?
Yeah.
Like, are they capable of taking a hand like Jack 9 and doing this with it? Like, a lot of the player pool just isn't, right? So if they are, then I think I have to like then move down into my distribution and like, okay, I'm up against one of the top players on the player pool on ACR or whatever, and I know that I shark scope them or I've played with them a bunch, and I just know that they're good and they're capable. Now I've got to dip down a little lower because I can't just be exploited like that. But for most players, I think we can comfortably fold this just so much of the time.
Yeah, distribution doesn't matter when they always have it.
Right.
Yeah. Distribution is something that you need to revert to as like a tiebreaker when you're faced with a tough decision. I think when we look at the range that they're playing here, their bluffs, when they exist, are such a small portion of their range here that I think that's a good way of putting it, Chris. Yeah, I think that's true. So did we did they show by any chance?
No, I didn't get any information. I didn't get any extra information out of it. I did make the fold on the river, and I don't think we did particularly well in this tournament. I think it was pretty much downward trajectory after this hand,
but it's a tough spot. I mean,
it was a big shove on the river, and I'll post the video in the forums too. Once I get a little bit of feedback, I'll wait till see if some people post in it. But I've got the clip of the actual video that I'll post in there too.
Cool, cool.
Yeah,
nice.
I just think that this is a classic hand to evaluate in position versus out of position. I think this would be a completely different hand in position.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true.
You know, that in position player could have ace 9 right now.
It's just what I was thinking. Yeah,
it's
true.
And play it the same way, and we'd still have to fold our ace 9ers, and there's still a way we can do it out of position.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a thing. Position's real. It matters.
Yeah, I was reminded of an old John Juanda hand that he played against Tony G. It was a multi-white pot, and Tony G makes a royal, and John Juanda throws away trips, and on the river he kind of looks at as Tony shows the royal, and I folded trips. I had trips, and that's just what it reminded me of in the moment.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show, the absolute strength of your hand is only so important. Like, really, the relative strength of your hand is so much more important than the absolute strength of your hand. And then once you start ranging opponents and realizing just how few bluffs they really have here. Okay, last question, gang. The big overbet here. That's obviously polarizing. Like, I think we don't feel that they're going to do that with like King Jack, for instance. That feels like that would be a good play here necessarily. But what do you guys feel like when you see these massive overbets? Do you kind of give the player credit for doing that in a balanced fashion, or do you feel that it skews towards value, or do you feel that it skews towards bluffs in a vacuum? Yeah, Chris, you were nodding there. Why don't you jump in?
In a vacuum, it skews towards value.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, I think the bigger the overbet gets, the harder it is to find bluffs. Like, I think if it's like a
Oh.
small overbet, then okay, then you can kind of think, okay, well, maybe, they're doing something funny. But when it's this big and it's this many chips, it seems like, how are they balancing it? You know what I mean? Like with bluffs, because it seems hard to do that. Um, yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, we look at something like a twice pot bet. You should have 33% value, 63% bluffs in a twice bet or twice pot bet. But how are you going to find 66% of the bluffs in this scenario? So even if it was only twice the pot, you still want to have about 66% bluffs in that situation, and you just can't find that many.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was trying to range them in the moment, and every hand I could think, I was just like, nope, I lose to that, I lose to that, I lose to that. Yeah, I might beat that. And then it's just, I have to fold.
And you said that you only had 2 orbits with this player, so they didn't have a lot of reads on you either. And if they're playing a lot of bounty tournaments, then they're gonna be in spots like this where when they do have a very strong hand, it really does favor the huge overbet, because like I said at the top of the show, you want to make sure to collect that bounty. And the kind of hands that you're going to call a 3/4 pot or a pot size bet here, they're also like they're strong. If they're strong enough to call 3/4 pot or pot on this run out, then most of them are going to call the overbet as well. And so I think they benefit in the long run from taking that bigger sizing with the hands that you're gonna be behind anyway. So I think that is probably even more of an argument for folding here.
I was just
Well, it's a very interesting spot. Yeah, sorry, Ben. Wrap it up.
I was just looking at results wise, just for those who are curious. I did end up busting before the money. I think I made a fairly deep run, but I was close to the money, and I got 375 back for bounty. So
there you go.
That's why I like the bounties, because then you get a little bit of equity back, right, or whatever, right? You get a little something that's like, okay, especially for a recreational player, just playing on the weekends and stuff. It just gives you that little, okay, I got a little something.
And I think it also takes the pressure off min cashing, right? Like you can kind of play for the win more, because if you scoop up a couple bounties, you've already, like you say, you've already put something in your pocket. And I think that does kind of incentivize people to play for the win. Which is great. That's how we should be playing poker. Well, you mentioned Clayton Fletcher, right?
One of my favorites.
He's got a great competitive mind. He, like us, Ben, he also likes these knockout formats, and he also feels like first place should get all the money. So go play for the win. And I think there's no surprise that this is the kind of format that incentivizes that. Well, any other thoughts on this hand or on this spot, gentlemen? It's a tricky spot to be in. Overbets, out of position, ace off, big blind defense. We had a lot of interesting things to talk about here. Well, I would just say then thanks, Ben, for bringing this hand to the forums and for coming on the show like always. And I'll thank Chris and Rob and John as well for being here. I want to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and mostly you, the listeners. Happy New Year, and we'll be here again next week. See you then.